Welcome to the Richard Lloyd USA YouTube channel. I'm Richard Lloyd. Today I'm going to do an automotive video on my Hyundai Santa Fe 2003. Recently I replaced the transmission on this thing and I noticed that there was a bunch of other work I wanted to get done. Transmission's working great, by the way, but the calipers on the front and the back were rusty and corroded, and I wanted to get that rust off the brake calipers and paint them up so that they don't corrode anymore and they look nice as well. So today what we're going to do, I'm going to do a separate video for the rear calipers, but today I'm going to do the front calipers, and I'm going to wire brush them down and paint them with special paint. This is the Rust-Oleum caliper paint. It's meant for brake calipers as it's high temperature paint. So let's get at it. Let's take the brake calipers off, grind them down, and paint them. I'm going to put links for everything in the video description below. All those links are affiliate links, and what that means is that at no cost to you, you help my channel out by buying through those links the same products that I used on this job. Also, another bonus on that is that you get the exact same products that I use on this video delivered to you from the same seller. So that's another plus. But I greatly appreciate it if you use those links, and like I said, it doesn't cost you any extra than going directly to Amazon or eBay and purchasing directly yourself. So do me a favor, use those links and help me out. So first I'm going to go through the standard automotive video disclaimer. I take no responsibility for any injury, loss or damages caused by you following the instruction on this video. This video is for educational uses only. Also, I'm going to show you next all the safety equipment and protective equipment that I'm going to use in this video. I highly recommend that you use all these things, and including the hat. The hat has saved me a few times from injury, scrapes and cuts and so on, from my head being in tight spaces like this wheel well or underneath the vehicle as well. The hat has saved me on that point as well. So let's go take a look at the stuff I'm going to be using for safety and protection, and then we'll go from there. So here are all the things I used in this video. I got a 7-piece grinder brush kit from Harbor Freight. A really good deal. If I can find the item number, I think it's on there. I'll put it in the video description as well if it's a link if I can get it. A 1/4-inch socket set here. I only used the 10mm on that, but that's what I used there. A 3/8-inch socket set, which I use most of to do this service. I've got a 1/4-inch torque wrench. Definitely need all these torque wrenches, except maybe for the 1/2-inch, but I'll get to that. The 1/4-inch torque wrench is for the bleeder nipple. The 10mm for the bleeder nipple. You could use the wrench too, the 10mm wrench, 12mm wrench and socket, 14mm wrench and socket, and a 17mm wrench and socket, as well as various socket drivers. I've got 2 here of different lengths. Probably only need one of those. And there's the 3/8-inch torque wrench. Again, don't do brake work without having a torque wrench to do the proper torque settings for all the bolts involved. This is not something you want to take a guess at. Your brakes are a safety feature of your car. Make sure you torque all the bolts down to the proper specs, and I'll put those in the video description for you as well. 21mm impact sockets. I got 2 of them there, a short one and a long one. And that's what I use the 1/2-inch torque wrench for. And that's on the lug nuts for the wheel, as well as a breaker bar to get them off. Protective equipment, gotta have it. A very, very good set of safety glasses. N95 respirator mask for me, that's what I used. Work gloves for sure, and nitrile 8mm gloves for handling the brake fluid parts. And also I used just a hand wire brush. You could probably use that to get all the corrosion off the caliper, but in my case that would have taken weeks because there was so much on it. DOT number 3 brake fluid. You're going to need to bleed the brakes if you follow my instructions on this video. I also have a video on how to bleed the brakes, so you can follow that as well. I will link that in a card and in the video description. There's the star of the show, the Rust-Oleum caliper paint that I used to spray paint the calipers after I got them all clean. Some brake cleaner, an angle grinder, again got that one from Harbor Freight for like $14. And I used it to grind all the rust off. Also I used the drill with these various heads here to get into the deeper crevices. It worked really well. The Harbor Freight speed pump or jack here. Actually, this one here has been, I did a video on it, and it is now featured on the Harbor Freight site, so thank you very much, Harbor Freight, for that. This is the exact same jack that you will see my video of when you go to Harbor Freight to look up this jack. So cool. I also used an impact driver, not necessary. This is optional. It just makes it quicker to get the bolts off, and I only use it to get the bolts off, and then maybe after starting the bolts just to quickly snug them down, but I don't use them to torque anything down because it's really powerful and most likely it's going to ruin your nuts or your bolts, one of the two. 2 3-ton jack stands used to hold up the vehicle while you're doing the both front calipers, and that's basically all of it. Yeah. Oh, and these rubber hoses, I use them to stop the banjo connections from the caliper from leaking. So a couple rubber hoses that would fit there would be useful for you. I'll measure them and put that in the video description as well. Their outside diameter is what matters. Yeah, that's it. And yes, can't stipulate strongly enough, protective equipment. The gloves saved my hands a couple of times. The safety glasses, I mean, stuff was bouncing off of them the whole time I was doing the service. So like little strands of this steel brushes are going to break off and fly into everything. So that's just normal. They just break off. That's wear on those brushes. But I would strongly suggest that you wear jeans and a long sleeve denim shirt to do this, because those things will fly off and they will hit you. So definitely wear the protective equipment. Don't think that you can use a grinder with a steel brush safely without it. You can't. So again, really stipulating on that. The C-clamp I use for compressing the calipers, and the painter's tape I used to cover the pistons and the seals on the pistons when I was painting it. So that's all the stuff. One more thing I forgot to include, and that is the wheel chocks for the rear wheels to keep the vehicle from rolling. I just saw them when I was cleaning up, so I just adding this to the pieces needed to do this service. Wheel chocks for sure, safety. Also, something that I think is very essential for this service is the Permatex silicone ceramic extreme brake parts lubricant. This stuff is awesome, really good stuff. Great for the sliders, for lubricating the brake sliders, as well as the brake pads and the shims as well. The clips on everything on the brakes, you can use this on. And this stuff is really awesome. High temperature grease, 3,000 degree max Fahrenheit, amazing. So again, all the stuff in the video description below. Strongly recommend getting this stuff. I know it's not cheap, but it's well worth every penny, and you get a lot for the price. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is, as I stated at the beginning, is chock the wheels at the rear, put the parking brake on, make sure the vehicle's secure, not going anywhere. It's in park as well. And then we're going to have to loosen the lug nuts on this, and I like to do that while it's on the ground. I've got several options on how to do that. I'll go from the hardest to the easiest. Hardest would be using the lug wrench that came with your tool, your vehicle, to replace a flat tire. That's usually in your trunk as a part of the kit. You could use that. You could use next a lug wrench like this. This is on the 13/16 on the inch side. That'll take off or loosen the lug nuts. Or you could use a 21 millimeter socket. This is a 1/2 inch socket with a breaker bar, 1/2 inch breaker bar. And the least of all would be as far from an impact driver like this to take off the lug nuts as well. I don't know. I don't like using this to take off these lug nuts because it puts a lot of strain on it, number one. Number two, it really backs them up way off, and then I got to go back and put them back in again. I like using the breaker bar, because that gives me the best feel on those nuts. So then I go on a crisscross pattern, like a star pattern, so the furthest nut away from the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, to loosen them up. But we're just going to loosen them. We're not going to take them off. And then we'll lift it up and then remove the wheel. So let's loosen them up. Next, we're going to jack it up and put it on the jack stands and go from there. Okay, I'm often asked this question is where do I jack the car up? Well, the official answer on page 36 and 37 of the owner's manual will show you all that, and here's the example, but I'll show you physically on the car. So again, why you need the owner's manual, because it's very clear on where it's supposed to be, and it's a little notch that's cut out into the rocker panel here and here, and you can see mine's a little damaged because it's been jacked up without any protection to the actual rocker panel itself. My jack actually has a hockey puck on the pad that keeps that from happening. I'm gonna probably have to fix this a little bit because a little bit of corrosion starting there, so I'll fix that up and paint it. But to stop any more corrosion. Luckily, I live in Texas where it doesn't rain much, but that's where the jack stand will go, or where your jack will go when you're jacking it up. The unfortunate part here is that you can't really put the jack, the pump jack on this and jack it up and then put the stand on it, because obviously the jack's going to be on there. So what I do is I go over here to the subframe mount that you can see there, and I take the jack over to it, and I'll pump it up here. Hopefully you guys can see that. There we go. And that hockey puck actually fits that mount perfectly. There we go. There. And then I lift it up from there, and after I'm done lifting it up from there, then I put the jack stand right here and lower it down on that. Never, ever, ever use the jack to hold up the weight of the vehicle. That's not a reliable or safe thing to do. It's only hydraulic pressure that's holding it there. A jack stand locks and it doesn't go anywhere, so always use a jack stand, and that's how I pump it up. And then put the jack stand where it's supposed to go on this pinch point on the rocker panel. So I'm going to jack it up, and I'm going to put the jack stand there to show it to you, and then we'll be done. I've got the jack stand at its full extension, and the pump jack at its full extension, and the jack stand at the pinch point. So now we're just going to lower it easily and slowly onto that nut. So slowly ease it down onto the jack stand, and there we go. Nice. And notice that I have a rubber pad on this jack stand as well to protect the metal as well. I don't like putting scratches on any portion of my vehicle, or because that's where corrosion starts and when things start to wear out. So yeah, I protect them. I bought the rubber pad for the jack stand as well as the hockey puck on the actual pump jack itself. So yeah, there we go. We're safely on the jack stand. Next, we're going to take off the wheel and start removing the caliper. So now we've got the car jacked up. I've got the lug nuts fairly unsnugged, and this is where power tools come in really nicely. Let's take the lug nuts off and then remove the wheel. That's it. Let's go take a look at the caliper. Okay, so now we're taking a good look at the caliper, and you can see there that it is corroded, but not badly. It's not, there's nothing functionally wrong with the caliper. From what I can tell, it seems to be working just fine. It's just, not looking the greatest. I'm just gonna, like I said, wire brush this down to the metal, or as best possible, remove as much of that surface corrosion as I can, and then paint it. And I'm going to take the caliper off and the mounting bracket for the caliper as well, and do them both so that they both are the same color and both look really good. And I'll show you that next. So I'm going to turn the wheel outwards so that I have better access to the bolts on the back of the caliper and the mount, as well as the flex line. And then I'll show you all those bolts, and then we'll start taking them off. So I'm just going to unlock the steering wheel, turn it. Don't even need to turn the car on. Let's do that. That's all the way to the left or turning left. So that gives us better access to all the bolts on the back and flex line as well. And that makes it easier to remove and easier to show it to you from the other angle. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the flex line, and I have an example of a flex line there. You can see the eyelet to it right here, and as soon as you do that, brake fluid's just going to start pouring out of it naturally, and you need to plug it. Otherwise all the brake fluid will drain out of your system and you'll introduce a lot of air into it. We will have to bleed the brakes anyway, but you don't want to drain all the fluid out and then, unless you plan on replacing it all. You don't really want to drain it all and introduce all that air into it, because it takes a long time to get all the air out of the system. So as soon as we take the flex line off, you'll have this eyelet, and the way I'm going to stop it is I'm going to use a piece of 3/8 inch rubber pipe that I have, or hose, and just mash it into the center like so, and go all the way through to the other side. And maybe it's better from this side, let's see. And once that's done, it'll stop the flow of brake fluid through the actual eyelet, as you can see here. There we go. And that's far enough that the rubber hose fits really tight and expands inside the eyelet and seals it. Then I'll just let it hang or move it out of the way, but basically that's how we're going to take care of that from leaking all that out and letting air be introduced into the system. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is take the flex line off. It needs to come off in order to remove the caliper anyway, but that's how I'm going to seal it. Of course, I'm going to put my drop pan underneath it so that I can capture any brake fluid that comes out. I will be wearing gloves, and I'll be really careful not to get that brake fluid on anything that matters. In other words, anything. It's just going to go straight into the pan, hopefully, and that'll be the end of that. The neater and cleaner you are with that brake fluid, the better. So we're ready to take the flex line off here. It's a 12 millimeter bolt, and but prior to taking that off, I want to point out a few things. Number one, once you take this off, you will have to bleed the brake system. Actually, you'll have to bleed this caliper. This is an independent brake system. You can actually bleed just independent calipers. So you can bleed just this caliper. Of course, we're going to do both calipers, so we'll be bleeding both. And since it's an independent system, you can just bleed the front brakes, and that's what we will do. But regardless, brake fluid is, as I said, pretty nasty stuff, so make sure you're wearing your gloves, number one. Number two, brake fluid is also hygroscopic. What that means is that when you expose it to the environment, it starts absorbing moisture from the air. It'll basically take water out of the air and absorb it. The problem with that is, once that happens, is that the more moisture you have in the brake fluid, the more likely that you're going to have air in the brake lines, because it becomes really hot, and it basically turns that moisture to steam, which then becomes air and water. So you want to avoid getting air in your brake system for many reasons, and you want to avoid exposing your brake fluid to the environment as much as possible. It's a sealed system. It should remain sealed. So when you put brake fluid in, make sure that you cap the the container that you put the brake fluid in from, number one, and make sure that you quickly cap your fluid reservoir after you put the brake fluid in the system. So those are the reasons why you want to keep it sealed as much as possible. That's why I'm going to put the stopper on this when I'm done, not just to keep the air from going in there, but to keep moisture from going into the brake fluid as well. So prior to me taking this 12 millimeter bolt off, I've topped up the reservoir underneath the hood or in the engine compartment to pretty well to the top, because I know I'm going to lose a lot of fluid in the process of it. Never reuse brake fluid. So once you've exposed it to the environment, like by draining it into the pan underneath, which I have right now, don't use it again. Just go buy yourself some more and refill it with fresh, clean fluid from a sealed container, which means it'll be as moisture free as possible. And also, brake fluid is usually good for about 3 years from the time that you first put it in. So, you know, once in a while, it's not a bad thing to change it out. So let's take this bolt off. One of the things too is I believe that there'll be a couple copper washers on this eyelet as well. So watch out for those. Again, I got the pan underneath to catch anything. So let's take that bolt off. I'll use my 12mm here. There we go. And just basically break it, and instantly you start seeing the fluid starting to drip out. And I'm going to get my hose ready so I can, you know, jam it in there real quick and seal that up after I take the bolt off. So let's keep going with that. See if I can move it there. There we go. So yeah, I don't see the copper washers or anything, or any kind of, they may be stuck onto the bolt, but regardless, just watch for those. Let's get that off of here. There we go. And you can see it dripping out there. I'll put my bolt down here and quickly just stop it with the hose like I mentioned before. There it is, sealed. Isn't that nice? That works great. Now the caliper's full of fluid as well. We're going to drain that out too. But prior to right now, it doesn't matter, because you know, anything that's coming out of the caliper or it's in this caliper right now is now just basically trash. There's no use in using it again. I'm just dumping it out. But we also have to, if you see here, these are the sliders for the caliper, and there are pistons inside this caliper that are extended out right now, because as the pads wear out, the pistons, you know, elongate or just come out of the cylinders, and basically they're now outside of the housing. And what we want to do is push those pistons back into the housing as much as possible, because I don't want to paint those, I don't want to sand those, I want to keep those as clean as possible. And so I'm going to compress the caliper next, and then I'm going to probably put some painter's tape over it or somehow protect it so that I don't get dirt or dust or paint on them. So let's compress the caliper. I'll show you how to do that next, and we'll continue on from there. All right, one more thing I wanted to mention is that the reason I topped off the reservoir is because you don't want to introduce air into your brake system from the reservoir. That would mean that you'd have to bleed the entire system. So you would have to bleed the back brakes, the front brakes, all the brakes, because you introduced air into the entire system. So yeah, that's why I topped off the reservoir, and you should keep an eye on that reservoir and make sure that it stays full all the time. I'm going to use a 6-inch C-clamp to actually compress the caliper, or the pistons in the caliper. This is a 2-piston system, so there's 2 pistons in here, and you want to basically get them compressed evenly. If you go off at an angle on either side, you're going to bind those pistons, and you may damage them as well. So you want to press the caliper from the center, which is what I'm doing. This is the caliper mounting bracket, and I'm basically putting the C-clamp on the caliper mounting bracket and moving it this way. This should move fairly easily. If this starts bending, or you're putting a lot of pressure on this, something's bound up and stop. You've got another issue. Maybe your sliders are stuck, in which case I would suggest taking off the caliper from the mounting bracket, and exploring further to see what's happening. Maybe your pistons are seized, but that's not in the scope of this video. Basically what I'm showing you here is how to take this off and paint it. But so I'm going to compress this, and this will basically bring the pistons back into the housing, and it'll work just fine. Now I know there's other ways to do this, but this is the way I like to do it. I like to do it while it's still attached to the mounting bracket, because the sliders help to keep the caliper straight, and the pistons go in nice and easy that way, and there's less likely chance for damaging the piston. So I'm just going to squeeze here, and it shouldn't take a lot of pressure, and fluid should come out as I do that, and you can see it moving, and there's the fluid. And as you can see, the caliper is compressing no problem, nice and easy. So that means it's my system's pretty free. Got to get the C-clamp out of the way here. and it's a 6-inch C-clamp, just in case anybody asks. And when you get to the end of it, it will just stop. You'll feel the pressure on the C-clamp that you can't go any further. Don't force it. Just stop right there. So I'm there at this point, and at this point I can take the believe 14 millimeter bolts off and then remove the caliper, and I'll show you that next. So we remove this bolt and this bolt, which are the slider pins, and then the caliper will just be removable at that point. So let's break those loose. Oops, go the right way. There we go. And you can see that my caliper is fairly free. It moves nicely, which is good. That means they're not bound. It's not bound up. So that one's loose. Let's loosen this one. And at this point, we should be able to just turn these out. If not, we'll use the socket as a bit of a lever here. But there we go. And at this point, caliper's off. Now, careful with the brake fluid. Don't get any on your pads or on the discs. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but these pads need to be replaced. This disc is, these brake pads are at the end of their life. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be making a video on that. I was talking about the copper washer. There it is. So I may have to pry that off, or maybe I'll just cover it. I'm not sure, but there's the copper washer, and there's one on the bolt as well. As you can see there, I'm sure you can see it anyways. They're copper at the base. So yeah, watch for those, and you know, try not to damage them, and try and protect those at all costs, because they seal the system. So those are important. And I'm just gonna drip and drain the fluid out of that by holding the caliper in that direction. So we got the brake caliper off. I'm going to take the brake caliper mounting bracket off as well. Before we do that, we should take off the brake pads, and I'll show you what else to remove from the mounting hardware for the brake caliper after I get it off. But first we're going to take the pads out, and they just basically just pull them off. And you want to remember which one's the front one and which one's the back one. It's pretty simple, really. I'll show you that in a second, but just slide it slide them out like so. And you see on the back one, you're gonna have the marks from the piston, because I've greased it up. And but if yours aren't marked, or you don't, you know, you're worried about remembering which one is on the inside, which one's on the outside, just mark them with a marker. But this is my inside pad, and as you can see, not a lot of life left to it. There's some, but not lots. And just take it out, put it out of the way somewhere clean. Same with the front. You just slides out simply. And again, just remember which one is which. There we go. Again, we still got some life on it. You can see the wear indicator here. We're okay, but yeah, I'm gonna be replacing that one as well. So that's gone. My rotor is really good, so I don't have to replace that. Now we've got two 17 millimeter bolts to remove from the back to remove the caliper bracket. So let's do that. And they're on there really tight. You heard that? That's tight. Some corrosion on these bolts. I may sand them down, or wire that, brush them down as well. There we go. There's the second 17. And now the whole bracket just lifts off. So next I'm going to take off these rubber seals and the sliders, as well as the brake caliper shims here. Take them off as well. I'll show you that next. So let's remove the hardware from the bracket. Not a lot there. There we go. Little shim. Same on the front, on the other side I mean. Another one just pops off. The sliders, these rubber grommets, hopefully yours are good. Mine are good, and so they're free too. So check for that. If they're not, definitely take a look at replacing those or fixing them or whatever it takes to make them free, because they should be really free like these ones. So these just pop right off. So boom, there it is. There's the slider and the rubber grommet, and they go back onto these lips here. And I would probably suggest to stuff something inside these holes prior to grinding this down. Again, keep it dirt free, and then after you're done, clean them out too. Again, brake clean and then re-grease these sliders. These sliders seem to be okay though. You know, and the rubber seals are good too, so there's no need to worry about them for me anyway. So check that while you're doing it. Check your brakes and stuff to make sure everything looks good when you're taking them apart, and anything you find that is not right, definitely replace it or fix it. So again, this slider, same thing, just pops off like that. Again, looks good, rubber looks good, everything looks good. Check that. Again, I'm going to seal these up before I grind them down. I'll probably use some, I don't know, plastic, cloth, something to keep the dirt and dust from getting inside there while I'm grinding all the surface corrosion off. So there we go with that stuff. Now this part is ready for grinding. So let's grind it down and make it nice and shiny. And then we'll paint that as well. So here are all the tools that I'll have at my disposal to do the surface corrosion lift off of this caliper. I've got a grinder. I'm going to be using those wire wheels over there to grind off the surface corrosion. Probably the finer ones would be the better tools for that. These are a little rough. I've got a wire brush as well for the fine work as well, for places where that can't reach. I've also have another wire brush head here. It has fine wire strands on it as well. Again, safety, safety, safety. Make sure you wear all your protective equipment for this, especially eye protection, ear protection. I'm going to be wearing my breathing mask so that I don't breathe any of this stuff as it goes into the air. Also, this is a clamping work table, so I can clamp that thing down so it doesn't go flying off anywhere. I also can use vice grips in my C-clamp to hold it down as well from various angles. Again, you want to make sure that the piece doesn't go flying off in any direction, especially towards you. So make sure you secure the caliper prior to you starting to sand it down or grind it, wire brushing it down. Now, another thing I did on this caliper as well is I put the flex line bolt back into the actual. See if you can see it there. I put the flex line bolt back into the actual caliper to seal it, to keep any dirt and dust and stuff from going inside it. The bleeder nipple's still on it, so I'm going to be careful when I'm going around that, not to really hit it too hard, and just to keep it from getting. You want this as smooth and as abrasive free, or as free of scratches as possible, because it seals this system. Also, you use it for bleeding, so you want that to seal nicely when you're bleeding. So I don't know, maybe I might remove it and plug it with something else, but right now it's still there, and if I do, I'll show you that. And then again, the plug on the bolt on the flex line orifice is now back in there. I didn't torque it down hard. I just turned it down till it was snug and left it there. Pistons fully compressed. I will not be grinding anywhere near the rubber. I will be grinding the surfaces over the top of them though. But I'm going to be very careful not to hit the rubber or the pistons at all. This whole section in the middle, I don't have to really paint. I may give it a pass. I will see how good I feel about that. I might just give it a small pass, but I'm not going to go anywhere near the pistons or the seals, the rubber seals around it, because you don't want to damage those. As you can see, I got it clamped into the workbench, and now I'm just going to start grinding it. So I'll mute this out so it's not so loud for you guys, and show you the process as it goes. I'll probably speed it up as well, fast motion it. So let's get at it. So there's finished product. Looks almost new. There's some crevices and crannies I couldn't get into deep enough to get totally clean, but you can see it's really nice. Kind of makes me wish I bought silver paint for it because it looks really nice all silver, but I bought red paint, so we're going to paint it with red. It's Rust-Oleum high temperature brake caliper paint. It's 900 degrees Fahrenheit paint. You need a high temperature paint for, a brake caliper because they get really hot. So there's the front side, and on the back side, it's still pretty nice. I wasn't able to get all in this space, obviously, because it's really tight. Number one, I couldn't get the grinder in there. Number two, it's near the pistons and the seals, and I didn't want to get too crazy on that. So I ground it down as much as I could, or as well as I could. Got most of the, really heavy corrosion out of there. And besides, no one's going to see that anyway, and it can corrode for another 20 years and still be just as strong as it is now, so we don't need to worry about that. So basically, I've got the mating surfaces where the pads are going to go, really nice and clean, so that'll help in alignment and probably quite, keep them quieter because they won't move around as much. A nice solid fit on there. So yeah, other than that, I mean, there's what it looks like. Looks really, really nice. So now I'm going to hit it with some brake clean, and then I'm going to paint it. Here we're looking at the passenger side caliper mounting bracket. I wanted to point out a few things about this because the hardware is specific as to where it goes on it. So here I'll show you the driver's side next, but right now I'm just showing you the passenger side. And on the passenger side we have two sliders. The top slider has a rubber bushing at the end of it, and the top bolt has a much fatter lock washer on it than the bottom bracket bolt. The bottom bracket bolt has a thinner lock washer, and the bottom slider is just a straight slider. There's no bushing on it at all. So the bushing goes on top, the fat locking washer and bolt go on the top, and the thin locking washer and the slider without the bushing go on the bottom. And this is the passenger side. It's the same on the driver's side, but I'll show you that anyway. And here's the driver's side. I would say this is the after picture. You can see the big difference anyways, after wire brushing the whole thing anyhow. But top, right here, fat lock washer, 17 millimeter bolt. The slider has the bushing, and that of course goes on the top, same as the passenger side. Bottom bolt, same size, 17, with a smaller lock washer, and the smooth slider without the bushing on the top. So here's my setup. I used a ladder and a 2x4, and I like to hang the pieces from wire. I'm using coat hanger, and the reason I like to hang them is because it allows me to go all the way around and paint them all, and also allows me to move them around if I need to. I'm in a shady spot, light breeze. Understand they're always going to be overspray with spray paint, so be careful about anything, make sure that there's nothing really close to where you're at that you want to get red paint on, because it's going to get on there. On my fence and stuff, I don't think it's going to go that far. It's far enough away. But I got to keep the camera back and my equipment back because the overspray will land on it as well. So there's my setup, and there's the pieces. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint them now. And this is a paint I'm using. I'm using Rust-Oleum Caliper paint, 900 Fahrenheit red, and just a spray can. I'll put a link for that in the video description below. And yeah, just going to go at it. I'm going to put my protective equipment on as well and paint all those pieces. Before I begin, I wanted to show you that I used some painter's tape around the caliper pistons and seals just to protect them from the paint. You don't want that stuff getting on the caliper pistons or the seals. So that's how I did it, and just placed it over and then cut them out. Okay, at this point I'm going to let them dry for an hour, and then I'm going to flip them over and you know, basically hang them the other way around and get the parts that I couldn't get properly. You want to keep the can straight up as possible, vertical, and you want to do light sprays, light coatings, so it doesn't run. So far so good. I'll flip it over after an hour and finish the painting, and then I'll show you the finished result. Okay, I wanted to show you what they look like in the sun. They've cured now for 2 days. I actually found that they were tacky even after 24 hours. I checked the can, and the can says that the curing time for the paint is 7 days. So after 2 days, I haven't found much of them that's very tacky. A little spot here and there, but good enough to handle and put it back onto the car. So yeah, 7 days of curing for this stuff. Probably because it's 900 degree Fahrenheit paint, so it takes a long time to cure. It goes on thick, and I would say at the minimum, let it dry for at least an hour before you apply another coat. I would probably suggest better to let it dry for 2 hours. But let it cure for 2 days. I'm ready to put it back on the vehicle, so we'll do that next. So we're going to put the caliper mounting bracket back on. I've cleaned out the orifices here for the sliders with a Q-tip and some brake clean, so they're all good. These are the same on either side, so you can, don't worry about left or right. The calipers are left and right, and the left side is the driver's side, and the right side is the passenger side, and they're labeled on the actual caliper. You'll see an R and an L on them. But what we want on these is we want the thick lock washer on the top, thin long lock washer on the bottom. Bolts are the same. I'll tighten them down to specified torques, and I'll tell you what that is here in a minute. I'll get it out of my manual. So let's put these on. We'll go here. It goes on the inside as such, and you'll see this little bracket on the back there. The shield, rear shield on the disc brake, and again, thick lock washer on the top. I always hand tighten them so I don't, so I know if I'm cross threading or not. They should go in nicely just like that all the way by hand. So there we go. Now I get my manual out, and the torque on the caliper support on the front is 54 foot-pounds to 74 foot-pounds. So you choose someplace in the middle. I'll choose 66. The rear support is 37 to 44, and on 2007s and laters it's 51 right on. So again, we're dealing with the 2003 here, and that range goes from 2001 to 2006. So if you have a Santa Fe that's from 2001 to 2006, these torque values apply. So 54 to 74 on these bolts. I'm going to use 66, which is right in the middle, and I'm going to use my 3/8 torque wrench on these, and that's a 14. Nope, looks like it's bigger. It looks like it's a 17. Let's see. Yeah, 17 on that. Let's get it torqued down. I'm gonna get them just snug so that they gets aligned the best, and then I'll go all the way down with the torque. Okay. 66 on the top, 66 on the bottom. And I can't emphasize enough or point out enough that you should have a torque wrench to do these things. You want the bolts the right specified torque. These are brakes. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to underdo it. You want to do it just right. So 66 is what I'm using, but you could use anywhere from 54 to 74. Okay, that's nice and tight. We'll put on the caliper next and go from there. Actually, what we're going to do is, we'll put on the caliper next, and I'll show you that step by step. Okay, I said I was going to show you the caliper next, but actually we need to put the pads on first before we put the caliper on. And I've gotten these clips or shims cleaned up really nicely. I used a wire brush on them, and there's a little bit of corrosion left, but nothing to really worry about here. And they look great. So I'm going to put these on, and then we're going to put the pads on top of that. I'm probably going to lubricate these a little bit on the outside here so that the pads move more freely. And they just go on like this. They clip on, and we'll push them down here. There we go, nicely. I'm going to take a brush and just put a little bit of my Permatex lubricant in these brackets to help those pads move freely. So there's the first one on top, and the second one, sorry, first one on the bottom, second one on the top, and they look great. There we go. Next, we're going to lubricate them and then put the pads on. All right, I'm going to use Permatex silicone ceramic extreme brake parts lubricant. This stuff is amazing. Now it's expensive, but I'll put links into the video description below, and it's over 20 bucks for one of these bottles, but it's 8 fluid ounces, so it'll last a very, very long time. And it goes from minus 50 Fahrenheit to plus 3,000 Fahrenheit. So it will never cook off. It will never burn. Well, it shouldn't. And if your brakes are getting to 3,000 degrees, you're probably on fire at that point. But regardless, this stuff is really good. I'm going to use it. It has a really thick brush that comes inside it with this stuff, but I'm just going to use a regular little brush here to brush a little bit of this grease on here, or lubricant on here, and being real careful not to get any on the actual disc brake. So let's do that. Okay, there's one, and I'll do the top one the same way, and we'll carry on from there. So next we're going to put the brake pads on here. The rear, you'll be able to tell real easy. You can see the marks from the piston on it. And if you're putting the brand new ones on here, which basically is, I've shown you how to take them off and put them on, this is called, I call this the squealer or the squeaker, and that basically it's a wear indicator. So when your brakes get down to that level, they'll start making a noise. Hopefully they'll never get that low. You'll replace them before you get to that, because it will scrape against the disc, the rotor, and that will create a squeal, and that'll tell you, hey, you need new brakes. So let's just put it on the back here. Slide it on, just like that. Front one. Here's the shape on it. With calipers bite onto it. So there we go. Beautiful. Next, we'll put the caliper on. All right, I like to lubricate things really well, so I'll put some more of this extreme silicone or ceramic silicone lubricant. I put it on the front pad where the calipers will mate with the front pad on the outside, and same on the back or the inside pad where the pistons will mate with the inside pad. So there's lubricant on 4 points now, here, 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 and here. So that's done. Let's go from there. Next, we're going to put the sliders in. And well, we're going to lubricate them and then put them in. All right, here's the pins. They're sliders, and what I call them sliding. Anyway, the sliding pins. And the bottom one does not have a rubber bushing on the end. It's just a straight pin. It's also slightly smaller diameter. The top one is a little bigger and has the rubber, what do you call it, bushing on the top. Again, they look great. There's no problem with them, so I'm just going to use them again. If yours are damaged or worn or corroded, maybe, I strongly suggest that you replace them. These are great. The boots as well on mine are looking really nicely. I cleaned them with soap and water in the sink, and they're fine. And you'll notice one of them is bigger than the other, so the bigger one goes on the bigger diameter slider. Just make sure you're aware of that. And they have this little knurled top on them. That goes towards the slider itself. The other side locks into the actual mount. So we're going to put those in first. I'll go with the bigger one on the top and the smaller one on the bottom. And that's diameter wise, so put the top one in here, slide it on, and try not to do that. And then fit them on here, and then we're going to lubricate the pins and put them on. So I'll do that. Okay, I got the boots on, and I'm going to put the top pin in. I've obviously lubricated it nicely with that Permatex. Again, I'll put the link for that in the video description below. And at this point, we're just sliding it in on the top like so until the boot clamps down around the top. So there's slider number one in there, nicely lubricated. Take the excess off there. You don't want it, again, you don't want it going on the rotor or on the pads. But not that there's much risk of that, but there you go. There's the top one. Next I'll do the bottom one. Here we go on the bottom one. You can see I've lubricated it very liberally. Just slide it in like so. And the boot should just pop on over top of it. You notice that these have a little flat edge on them. That's a place where you can get a wrench on them, or as they say in the UK, a spanner, and hold them from spinning when you're torquing down the outside bolts. But again, there they are. Make sure you've got free play, like so. Push them in and out. You can see that everything's cool there. And next, we're going to mount the caliper. Okay, let's get the caliper on here. Slide it on and make sure you've got the left on the left. So the left would be the driver's side, the right would be the passenger side. So slide it on. There we go, just like that. You can see that I'm in front of the pins here. So at this point, we're going to put the bolts inside here, and then we're going to torque those down. And I notice here that the actual caliper holds on to these sliders perfectly. So again, the bolts are the same on the top and the bottom in this case, so that's not an issue. And because my pads are so low, I got to compress the caliper to get a bite on that. And everything's cool here. These are 14s, so I'm gonna hand tighten them down here. And I always started by hand, as I said, to ensure that I'm not cross-threading anything. There we go. And now we're going to torque them down to the specified torque, which is 16 to 24 foot-pounds. So right in the middle would be 20. And that's what I've got my ratchet set to. So let's go and do it. This is a 3/8 click type torque wrench. And it clicks when you're on the right torque. I'm giving you a little extra because it can go to 24 and it feels good. So there we go. Now the caliper is on. Now the procedure for doing this is the same on either side, so I'm only going to show you this side. We're not done yet though. We got to put the banjo connection on. That's what they call this, which is the basic where the fluid pressure for the calipers goes in. Once I take that hose out of there, of course, it's going to start dripping out. So I'm going to protect it with a rag so that I don't get brake fluid all over this beautiful paint. This brake fluid will, it's I don't know why, but it's very damaging to paint, plastics, everything. I got some on a headlight once. It took me forever to get it off. So I'm going to take the bolt out here, and then we're going to put this banjo connection on. Once again, I want to point out the copper washers. There's one on the inside of the bolt, so it rests against the head, and the other one rests against the actual caliper itself, and it seals the actual banjo connection. So make sure that you've got both of those there, and you can see them here, and hopefully you can see them here. I got the two coppers, and I'm going to put the one on the back, and the other one I'm going to slide over the front afterwards, and try and keep as much of this brake fluid from landing on the caliper. I'm just going to go like that for now, and then put the begin to do this. Now make sure your brake fluid is topped up in your reservoir. Mine is. So let's just take it off and begin this process. So there we go. I'm just going to use, hopefully you guys can see this. All right, so pull the hose off of there. There we go, and it begins to drip, which is what I was worried about really. And there we go. I've got the two copper washers, one on the outside and on the inside, ready to get it on here. And again, I'm protecting as much as possible the caliper from the brake fluid. I'm going to give it a little tightening with my 12 millimeter. There we go. That'll keep anything from leaking out. I'm going to wipe it down a little bit more, but there it is. I'll do a close-up so you can see how that banjo fitting goes into those two studs. So there's the close-up of the banjo fitting. You can see that it goes between, the neck on it goes between those two studs. That holds it steady. And then the bolt goes, the 12 millimeter bolt goes here. Of course, I got the copper on both sides, washers. Now we're going to torque that down to its specified torque. So the torque on that 12 millimeter banjo bolt is 18 to 22. So in the middle it would be 20. I'm going to hit it with that on my 3/8, and let's torque it down to 20 foot-pounds. I like to go in the middle because that gives me grace on accuracy. So there we go, 20 foot-pounds. So now everything on that caliper is connected. Here you can see the bleeder nipple. It has a torque value as well. The torque value on it is 5 to 6.6 foot-pounds. I would use an inch-pounds, quarter-inch torque wrench on that, and torque it down to 60 inch-pounds. Inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, because 60 inch-pounds would be 5 foot-pounds. So you can do the math for 6.6 if you want to go all the way up, but I think 5 is more than enough. And the inch-pound torque wrench, quarter-inch torque wrench works really well for that. So yeah, make sure you get all those torques correctly, and I'll put them again in the video description below. Well, there's what the finished product looks like, caliper on there, and it looks really, really nice. I'm going to take one more shot of this with the wheel on so you can see what it looks like with the wheel on. But as you can see, great result, really happy with it. Next thing I need to do is bleed it, and I will put a link, a card for that up here for you guys, because I've done a video on how to bleed the brake system. I may do another video on replacing the brake pads through and through. I've basically shown you how to do that here in this video without any bleeding, but I've shown you how I lubricate things and how everything goes together and which torques they go to. But I think I'll do a separate just replacing the brake pads video. But now I have to bleed the system. Actually, I have to put the other caliper on the other side on as well, and then bleed both sides thoroughly. But I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to put the wheels on and show you what that looks like with the wheel on. But it looks great right now. Well, last but not least, we got to put the wheels back on, and they're going to be torqued down, the lug nuts, to 79.6 foot-pounds per. So per each, I'm going to use a star pattern like I did when I took it off. It's much more important when you're going back on. And I hand tighten them first. So let's just get the wheel back onto the hub. And then after all this, I'll show you what the caliper looks like. With the wheel on, that is. There we go. Now, you want to seat it as far forward as possible. It should be flush or with the with the rotor on the back. You can feel it if it's right on the edge. Mine is. And I keep pushing down on the bottom to keep it from popping back off. And then again, I'm going to hand tighten these to make sure that I don't cross thread them. And I'll start it with 2, and that'll secure it. Use my 21mm here. Snug again. There we go. Nice and snug. Now we'll put the rest of them in here. And I'll use my impact driver to finish them off here in a second, but I will use the torque wrench to go all the way down on these bolt nuts, I mean. So, and again, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, cross pattern. It feels so good on that one. There we go. Okay, and again, I don't do the final torque with the impact gun. I just use this to make it fast. And before you torque it down, we're going to lower it down onto the ground. All right, lowered it down, tighten it up. Well, I'll torque it down to the correct value. I think I might have a strip one here. Yep. So here's the final result after all that work. I do have a bad stud on that lug nut, so I'm going to have to replace that, which means all this has to come off again, but I'm not making that video here. I just wanted to show you what it looks like with the caliper all painted. Looks great. Looks like I'm going to have to paint some more here, but I'll do that at another time as well. But that's the finished result. It looks great. I've done the other side too. The brakes are bled and ready to go. My next project, replace the stud on that bolt right there, that lug nut. Right, here's the wheel glistening in the sun. Caliper looking really nice. I'm really pleased in how that turned out. I also painted the hub silver as it was wearing off. It was peeling, so now it's nice and shiny to match everything else. So I'm really happy with that result. That stud on that lug nut was certainly finished, as you can see here. I don't know, all the threads gone there. So yeah, it was destroyed, so I had to change it. I didn't video that because number one, it was the first time I ever did it on the car, so I wanted to get to know how to do it. And there's certainly a trick to it with this front hub on the Santa Fe 2001 through 6. So I had to shave the top of the actual stud off using my angle grinder and a cutting disc, and that got it out. And yeah, I may do a video on how to replace these in the future, because there is certainly a trick to getting them out and also a trick to putting them back in. So yeah, there we are. There's the finished result. That's it for my video on painting the calipers, so front calipers on a Hyundai Santa Fe 2001 through 2006 model. If you like this video and it helped you out in some way, do me a huge favor and give me a big thumbs up in the bottom corner. That helps my channel, my video, and I greatly appreciate it. Also, in the comment section below, if you could, if you got questions, suggestions, or anything else you want to say to me, just put it in the comment section below and I'll be sure to look at those. At the end of this video, you'll see a picture of me. That is a subscription link. If you click that picture, you'll be subscribed to my channel. As part of the process of subscribing to my channel, you'll see a bell icon. If you click on the bell icon, you'll be notified every time I put up a new video, and then you can watch it at your own leisure. As well, in the video description, I'll put links to all the tools and supplies that I use to do this job. Those are affiliate links, and like I said in the past, they don't cost you a cent to use those any more than going directly to Amazon or eBay to buy them. And another bonus is you get them from the same sellers I would buy from. As well, you get the same product that I have in this video, which assures that you get the same result. Thanks again for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy.